This title is narrated with virtual voice. Computer-generated narration for audiobooks. The Beatle Who Vanished by Jim Berkenstadt. Foreword by former Beatle, Charles Newby. Jimmie Nicol and I are both members of a relatively small group of people who have played Live with the Beatles on stage. Our appearances with the greatest band in the history of popular music were for the same reason. We were substituting for a member of the Beatles on a short-term basis. However, the timing and consequences of being part of the band were very different. In December 1960, the Beatles had just completed their first visit to Hamburg. At that time, the band comprised John, Paul, and George, plus Pete Best on drums and bass player Stuart Sutcliffe. During their stay, Stuart met Astrid Kirchherr and was invited to spend the Christmas break with the Kirchherr family, while the rest of the band returned home to Liverpool. Once back on home soil, the band were looking for gigs to play and a bass player to fill in for Stuart until he returned in the new year. I had no aspirations to be a professional musician. I was studying chemistry at college and was back home for the Christmas vacation. I had known Pete Best from school, and we had played together in the Blackjacks before Pete joined the Beatles for their trip to Hamburg. I was familiar with the repertoire they played at that time, and so for 4 nights at the end of 1960, I played bass with the Beatles. I went back to college early January, and Stuart came home to resume his role with the band. In 1964, the situation was very different. The Beatles were famous on both sides of the Atlantic. They had played in Paris during January. In February, they had made their first tour to America, and a world tour to the Netherlands, Far East, and Down Under during June had been confirmed. Ringo became ill with tonsillitis and was rushed to a hospital the day before the tour was due to start. Jimmie Nicol took the seat behind the skins with the Beatles up until the time that Ringo was well enough to rejoin the band. Jimmie, an experienced professional drummer, joined the Beatles the 4th of June for gigs in Denmark, Holland, Hong Kong, and then Australia. Ringo recovered to meet up with the Beatles in Melbourne, Australia, on the 15th of June, and Jimmie flew back to England on his own. After graduation, I got married and my wife and I moved away from Liverpool to rural Warwickshire. I am now retired and spend my days playing golf and spoiling my 4 beautiful grandchildren. I play bass with a local oldies band called the Rackets. At the end of August each year, I go back home to the Casbah Club in Liverpool for the annual Beatles weekend and meet up with Pete Best and his 2 brothers, Rory and Rogue, play a few tunes and relive old times. And what happened to Jimmie after his brief and exciting time with the Beatles? To find out, you have to read this remarkable book. Jim Berkenstadt has used his renowned literary and investigative skills to piece together the story of The Beatle Who Vanished. This is a significant addition to the bibliography of that most exciting period of music and social history. Read and enjoy. Charles Newby, Ulster, May 2012. Introduction. Jimmie Nicol died alone and nearly penniless in 1988. Well, that is what the world has been led to believe. But did he die? Only one outsider played with the Beatles on stage at the height of their Beatlemania fame. Jimmie Nicol had this good fortune. But was this brief episode of fame a stroke of good fortune, or a curse that would haunt him the rest of his life? The life and career of Jimmie Nicol is like an incomplete puzzle with pieces missing, not easily explained or understood. For a brief 13 days in June of 1964, Jimmie Nicol was asked to do the impossible and as a substitute drummer.
Para seguir escuchando este audiolibro gratuitamente, haz clic en el enlace de la descripción y podrás escucharlo completo sin coste gracias a la prueba de 30 días de Audible.